Welcome very, very much to Conversations, where it's a pleasure to welcome to the program one more time. We've done it in the past, and I think we're destined to do it more often into the future as well. Welcome to the program, Howard Bloom. And in my view, and the view of an increasing number of people, he's a major intellectual who has written most recently a book, which I'm going to display here or let it be seen, and it's called The God Problem: How a Godless Cosmos Creates. A very interesting title, a tour de force, I'm here to say, in terms of an intellectual look at things in a very comprehensive context, from the structure of the physics of the universe to geopolitical realities on planet Earth. And this is the copy of the book. We'll put it on the table here where you might come in on it again. On the cover of the book, it has "The God Problem Will Rock Your World." That's an accolade toward the book and to our guest, Howard. And that's from Barbara Ehrenreich, well known to many on the left, as it were, in the political system of the planet. And then also I have here, it's not on the book, but this is said of the book and of the author. It said, "The God Problem," and it says, this is quote, "Next," they're talking about Howard Bloom and the author of the book, and it says, "Next in a lineage of seminal thinkers that includes just a few of the lesser known people of the intellectual realm, Newton, Darwin, Einstein, and Freud." And that's a quote describing our guest, and that's from Britain's Channel 4, a major source of television production in Britain and around the world scene. And Howard, once again, welcome so very much to Conversation. Great pleasure.
It's a pleasure to see you.
Yes, it really is. It is true. You've written a book. I've read nearly the whole thing. It's very big, a very large book, and you write so well, if I may, and you write so cogently about things intellectual and the interplay of people, and you do literally cover all the way out to understanding some of the latest understandings of the physics of the universe, string theory, this sort of thing, right down to the political. You are what would be called a comprehensivist, I would submit, right?
Well, once upon a time,
Yeah.
I invented a field called omnology.
Yeah, that's right.
Right,
That's very good.
and the reason for inventing omnology is because when you're a sophomore in college,
Yeah.
and you're interested in theoretical physics, and
Yeah.
you're interested in biology, and you're interested in film,
Uh-huh.
anyone with a normal mind
Yeah.
says to you, make up your mind.
Yes,
What
right.
are you? If you're not, are you going to be a biologist? Are you going to be a theoretical physicist? Or are you going to be a filmmaker?
With all due respect,
Yeah.
I think with the computer and linear regression, it's galloping towards
Yes,
specialization, and it's a
well-
way of dividing and conquering the intellectual community through specialization.
But we don't need to gallop towards specialization. Yes, a small number of people do need to be specialists.
Small, but
Us-
it seems to be a characteristic of the whole endeavor.
But we need a balance of specialists and generalists.
Well, with all due respect, we have practically no generalists or systems of systems thinkers.
That's true.
And it's
that's,
discouraged, and the trends are very discouraging.
well, what I want a kid to be able to say
Yeah.
is, I'm interested in film, I'm interested in theoretical physics, I'm interested in biology, and frankly, that's what makes me unique. I'm going to follow all three of those interests for as long as they hold me, and I'm going to continue following my bliss, following my passions, the Joseph Campbell saying, so long as my curiosities last. Why? Because when I'm 40 years old, and my friends are coming back with, they don't know why they've wasted their lives. They don't know why they're on planet Earth. They buy little red sports cars and pick up blondes and cheat on their wives to give themselves a sense of some importance in the world. I'm going to be coming back with the fruits of my 5 curiosities, my 3 curiosities for the first time, and what I come back with is going to be utterly unique. So that's an omnologist, a person with an omnivorous curiosity, with a curiosity that just won't stop.
Do you think it's inherent in the Homo sapien consciousness that it is curious? You see, 5-year-olds are curious and interested in everything.
And
They really are.
It's a mammal thing.
Mammal, okay,
Yeah,
yeah,
cats
okay.
kittens are curious. They
Yeah.
go exploring everything. They
Yeah.
try pawing everything and see if it acts like a mouse.
Right.
Laboratory rats are curious. They go sniffing around. Those little noses just go like crazy.
Yeah.
We're all curious. It's just that humans have a lot more facilities to be curious with. We don't just have our noses, unfortunately, are nothing compared to the noses of rats and the noses of dogs. But the fact is, we have so many different ways of looking at things with our brain, emotional ways, symbolic ways. We have to learn things by their grasp and touch. Curiosity is one of the greatest things humans have.
And we can begin to put things into perspective because we're also, it seems to me, unique in terms of evolution. Evolution seems to be, I tend to be secularly minded, as do yourself, I think, in terms of we're able to understand things without the mythic overlays that we've had to have in order to answer the dictates of a self-reflective consciousness capable of asking the larger questions. What's it all about, and so forth. But we've also had the capability of extending our consciousness through tools and technology with an interesting, exponentially increasing effect upon the environment. I did geography. We had a book, How Man Changes the Face of the Earth. Mankind. So that we have a capability of that. So we're a unique entity in universe that is apparently being, the realities of which to the far reaches of the universe, down to molecular structure and so forth, of everything, is becoming available to us in this time frame that we live.
You have to recognize, though, that we're not unique in changing the nature of our environment.
Okay.
And we're not unique in, let's put it this way, we're not unique in raping Mother Earth. Let me explain what I mean.
Please.
Once upon a time, all life was in the sea. And the idea of getting out on the land would have been ridiculous because the land was utter barrenness. Ultraviolet rays were hitting it. It was dangerous. There was nothing to eat. It was just raw rock. And if you believe Charles Darwin's account of how worms changed the nature of the planet, worms digest stuff, and then what they can't eat, they shit out. And what they shit out is what we call topsoil.
That's
so
right. Or E.O. Wilson with consilience.
So what we call nature, that is a landmass covered by earth and covered by greenery, is something that worms made by raping the raw stone of a pristine earth.
You think rape is maybe a loaded term?
Well, yes, it's a very loaded term, and it's a loaded term for a reason. Because it's important to recognize that natural processes are often what we would call unnatural. In other words, they take the existing nature of things and they change that nature.
Well, it is true, apparently. I think it's 99.9% of all species that have ever existed on this planet, once evolution got started, have gone extinct.
That's right.
Okay?
And
so
there have been
there's an ever-changing
142 mass extinctions. So
mass? I've thought of 5 major mass extinctions.
There are 6 major mass extinctions, and mass extinctions come approximately every 23.5 million years. So there have been a lot of them up till now. And yes, it's quite true that nature discards species easily. She's very, very careless in the way that she spends the lives of entire species.
I wonder if there's any direction or point, Robert Wright and so forth writes on a direction and point or point of direction to evolution itself. That's a question, whether there's any denying the laws of the second law of thermodynamics, that all systems move toward entropy.
You know that this book has got 5 heresies. And heresy number 3 is that the second law of thermodynamics, the law of entropy, is all wrong. In fact, it's such ridiculous stuff that it's astonishing to believe that serious people with good brains have ever taken it seriously.
Yet it is taken seriously by much of the scientific community.
Entire scientific community.
Yeah, the entire scientific community. So how can we say that the entire scientific community is wrong?
It's very simple. The second law of thermodynamics says that all things tend toward disorder, all things tend toward entropy, and
to the limits of a closed system.
Well, but that's another matter. We'll do closed systems and open systems at another point. But the standard example to demonstrate entropy is pick a sugar cube, drop it in a glass of water, stir with your spoon, come back 15 minutes later, and the sugar cube is gone. But that's not the way the universe works. The universe works in the opposite manner. The universe works by starting with a glass of water and producing a sugar cube. What in the world do I mean? Well, once upon a time, there was nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Right.
And then all of
bagel.
a sudden, yeah, and
Yeah.
all of a sudden there
Yeah.
was a pinprick infinitely smaller than a pinprick, and exploding from it came a raw sheet of space and time.
Uh-huh.
Now, going from nothing to a pinprick, that's a big step up.
That sure
Going-
is.
Going from a pinprick to an exploding sheet of space and time.
Yeah.
Space and time, where did those come from?
Yeah,
They're
right. Yeah.
Brand new qualities
Dark
in the universe.
energy.
Yeah.
Dark energy. Where
But-
the hell is that?
Yes,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
that's another giant step up.
Yeah.
And then within 10 to the minus 30 seconds of a second later, a really small sliver
Yeah.
of a second,
Yeah.
all of a sudden the space and time precipitated the way a storm cloud precipitates in raindrops.
Yeah.
It precipitated into the very first things, quarks and leptons.
Yeah.
That's another huge step
Yeah,
up.
right,
And we
right.
could trace the entire history of the cosmos, 13.72 billion years. And I can show you this universe jumping up stair steps consistently for 13.72 billion years.
Uh-huh.
So to say, as Stephen Jay Gould used to say,
Yeah.
oh, there is no such thing as progress. That's just a value system of us humans, an arbitrary one that we're
I loved your
imposing on
work with-
nature.
I loved your thing with Auguste Comte.
Yeah.
You wrote so well on that positivism.
Well,
You
yes,
know, in
because
that-
Auguste
yeah,
Comte,
yeah.
here we have this bunch of people in
Yeah.
1850. Remember, Darwin doesn't come out with the evolution of the species until 1859.
Right.
And we've got a little group of people hanging around at the dinner table
Yeah.
of a guy named John Chapman, a publisher.
Uh-huh.
And it includes Herbert Spencer, it
Yeah.
includes John Stuart Mill, it includes a guy named George Henry Luce, it
Just to
includes
name a few of the lesser luminaries.
it
yeah.
includes a woman named Marion Evans. It includes a guy who just got off of this big expedition, a
Yeah.
voyage of discovery
Yeah.
on a ship called the Rattlesnake,
Uh-huh.
and is impoverished. He doesn't have enough money.
Who that
and he's a naturalist.
Yeah.
His name is Thomas Henry Huxley.
Oh, yeah.
And,
Thomas
and, Yes,
Huxley.
yes.
All
And
those
Thomas
and-
Henry Huxley needs money to write up his findings from
Yeah.
his voyage on the Rattlesnake.
Yeah.
So all these people are hanging around the same dinner table,
Yeah.
and guess what they're discussing? They're constantly discussing evolution.
Uh-huh.
What? Evolution? How
evolution?
could they possibly
Yeah.
be discussing evolution?
Right.
Charles Darwin's Evolution of the Species is not going to come out for another 9 years.
Yeah.
Well, guess what?
Wallace.
Evolution.
Wasn't there a guy Wallace who was on
There
to
was
it?
Wallace,
Yeah, yeah.
but evolution had been in the air way
Uh-huh.
back around 1800, actually 1795.
Yeah, progress,
Charles
yeah.
Darwin's grandfather, Erasmus Darwin,
Right.
had written 2 books about evolution.
Absolutely,
And
yeah.
what was missing from evolution was a, quote, mechanism.
Uh-huh.
That's what was missing. But then Auguste Comte came
Yeah,
along in
yeah,
the
yeah.
1820s and 1830s,
Right.
and he used the word evolution hundreds of times
Yeah,
in his
uh-huh,
books
uh-huh.
because he was talking about the evolution of human history, the evolution of human society.
Yeah.
And John Stuart Mill was a huge fan of Auguste Comte.
Yeah.
And John Stuart Mill introduced this kid named George Henry Luce to the ideas of Auguste Comte. And it was his positivism, it was his ideas of evolution
Yeah.
that were so fabulously discussed around that dinner table
And you
at John
wrote
Chapman's
you
house.
write so well on that.
Right.
I want to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, you write so well about the interlinking all these people, and you write also with such good, well-toned humor. You bring
Well,
in
that's
humor
very
that's so
important.
good. But back to the beginning of things
Right.
like that. Back to, and that was important. And I got a quote I might get to from a fellow George B. Tyson,
Right.
the son of Freeman Tyson.
Right.
And he's written a book here. I'll show it to you. Maybe you can show it on a camera. This is a book it fell off the shelf the other day.
Right.
You know what I mean? I didn't. Darwin Among the Machines: The Evolution of Global Intelligence by George B. Dyson. We might read a thing from Herbert Spencer, or from Spencer that's there. But back to the thing about the universe in 13.72, I guess
Yeah.
it is, billion years ago, the Big Bang. And also whether this thing, because it seems to me it's part of the definition of the second law. And when you have a second law that we say is counter to what most all the scientific community accepts,
Right.
first law is no law, conservation of energy and
Right.
so forth. But if you have a law that is that like that, it's incumbent upon it is within the definition within a closed or open system. Whether the universe is a closed or open system
That's
is something that is up to synergistic
Right.
realization of full fulfillment of string theory, which come along in the last 20 years or so with that. whether it's an open and closed system, because there could be parallel universes.
Well,
that would
explain to
make
the
a difference.
audience
And
what an
whether
open-
it's a closed or open
Right.
system is an important one in terms
But
of defining.
explain to the audience what an open and closed system is and how it comes into discussions of thermodynamics.
Well, whether the universe is open or closed is that if it's one system that you can get to, you understand the universe is synergetic in time.
Right.
In fact, maybe I could try and read this if you don't mind.
No, go ahead.
Okay, let me do it. This is a thing from Samuel Butler.
Right.
Okay, back there, and this is Darwin Among the Machines, and this is something written in the mid-19th century and so forth. It's something to think about, and it's a little bit wordy in the 19th century way of speaking. As the vegetable kingdom was slowly developed over from the mineral. Okay, so that'd be algae and things that are coming,
Right.
and that's the question: how did life get started, or the constituents of RNA
Right.
that began to get to where you could get to DNA and to evolution itself?
Right.
There are people doing research on that.
Right.
There's a way into how it's happened. Some guy got clay and this kind of thing of
Right.
understanding how that happened. And as in like manner, the animal supervened over upon the vegetable. So now, in these last few ages, an entirely new kingdom has sprung up, of which we are as yet have only seen what will one day be considered the antediluvian prototypes of the race. ... As some of the lowest of the vertebrata attained a far greater size than had been descended to their more highly organized living representatives, so a diminution in the size of machines has often attended their development and progress. ... It appears to us that we are ourselves creating our own successors. Now you could think of that in terms of generations of successors of human beings, or you could think of that as the evolutionary process of development of species that leads to one, the Homo sapien, which is, in a certain sense, I'm claiming, particularly adroit, and in terms of its consciousness, very unique in its consciousness, perhaps the leading edge of conscious evolutionary purpose, possibly in universe, the Homo sapien species in relation to the others. But successors, giving them far greater power in supplying by all sorts of ingenious contrivance that self-regulating, self-acting power which will be to them what intellect has been to the human race. So the purpose, is there a purpose, or is there an arrow of purpose? Is there any purpose in terms that we can assign to, let's say, the evolutionary process or our existence in the universe, or not? And the second law of thermodynamics would see, in relationship to the cosmos, Fuller and others would see that it moves across, that the evolutionary process moves across entropy and brings increased conscious pattern of understanding of the process of which we are a part, which would have been unthinkable in the age of the dinosaurs or anything evolutionary in time other than the time in which we find ourselves. That kind of thing is
Right.
what I'm trying to get at.
I think that you can see a clear progression, and the clear progression is moving in the absolutely opposite direction that entropy would lead you to believe.
Well, then that would be a positivist thing.
It's a very positive thing. But again, remember the steps in the universe.
Yeah.
Big Bang to space and time. What? Space and time? Radically ridiculous stuff. That's a big step up. The next step, quarks and leptons.
Yeah.
How do you get matter? By simply adding time and space to time and space. That's a big leap up.
Quantum mechanics.
But 300,000 years down the road, we'll skip the plasma, we'll skip the fact that there were pressure waves and that there was a musical pattern in the cosmos, according to theoretical physicists.
Well,
there was a musical pattern in the cosmos.
When are you talking about?
This is as a period from approximately 1 second after the Big Bang until 300,000 to 380,000 years after the Big Bang, when everything is a scalding soup. A scalding soup means that particles are smashing into each other at super speed like bullets, hitting each other head on and ricocheting off each other, and then immediately ricocheting off other particles at super speed, and yet retaining their identity somehow. Certainly not falling apart into disorder. But even worse for the case of the entropists is this, that these particles that seem to be in an utter chaos are not. How do we know that? Because they come together and move apart en masse like Busby Berkeley dancers. How do we know that? Because
That's
we
really
see
good, yeah.
because we see the evidence of
Yeah.
what are called pressure waves, these
Yeah.
huge pressure waves that span from one end of the cosmos to the other, rippling across the face of an entire universe, and in a form that is so harmonic, that is so mathematically
It's
regular,
beginning to sound like green.
and
Yeah,
well, that-
harmonic and string and all that. yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
because
String
the
theory.
scientists who discovered it say that they compare it to music, and
Mm-hmm.
they say the universe rang like a gong. Is that disorder? That's in something that looks totally disordered.
Mm-hmm.
This ricochet, slam, bang, bump up car soup, you'd expect no order, and yet you've got
Mm-hmm.
this massive musical order. So that's the very opposite of entropy.
But
Then
it-
but then 380,000 years after the Big Bang, things begin to slow down. That's called cooling. And as they slow down, we've done this before, but
Yeah.
you know, the coffee table at the beginning of the universe is
Yeah.
in here, and you and I are sitting
Yeah,
at the
yeah,
coffee
yeah.
table at the beginning of the universe, and you're a bold visionary, and I'm an old, crusty, cranky, cantankerous conservative. And you tell me at the 380,000 year mark in the universe's existence, you tell me that you predict that things are going to slow down. And what's more, you predict that when they slow down, these things that, relatively speaking, are the size of the Empire State Building, are going to discover they have some sort of inanimate longing. I say, Harold, this is anthropomorphism. This is not science.
Yeah,
Things
yeah.
objects, particles do not have longing, and then you predict that these things, relatively speaking, the size of your fist,
Yeah.
are going to have an inanimate longing. And Harold, I know you're crazy. That's
Yeah.
anthropomorphism again.
Right.
These things are not going to have an animate longing. That's crazy. Particles don't have social feelings.
Yeah, right.
And then you say, what's more, the little things the size of your fist are going to be precise, have a longing that fits them precisely to these things the size of the Empire State Building. And I say, Harold, what planet have you been living on?
Yeah.
This is absolutely impossible.
Yeah.
Things the size of the fist are going to fit precisely with things the size of the Empire State
There
Building.
could be
This
a
is
lot of
ridiculous.
examples of that. The things that are that's synergetic. The
Yeah,
synergetic
right,
reality
exactly.
emerging.
But you turn out to
Emerging
be
properties.
yes,
yeah.
and you turn out to be right because the little things are called electrons, and the
Yeah.
giant things are called protons, and their inanimate longings do fit each other with more precision than German engineers could ever achieve.
Even German.
Even
engineers.
German engineers,
Yeah.
right? And is this disorder? This is so far from
Yeah.
disorder that it defies imagination. Does every scientist on the planet have access to this story? Yes. Yes. If they know this, how can they possibly believe that the universe is constantly falling apart?
Well, there might be a countervailing element to it. That would be Fuller.
Yeah.
Fuller would posit that the evolutionary process is a countervailing force in the universe that is moving across entropy and bringing increased conscious pattern of understanding that there is a purpose and a direction to evolution and to the human endeavor.
Right, right.
Okay.
And Fuller would be right, and the entropists would be wrong.
And that could be done within a secular context without having any kind of animating God or
Absolutely,
anything of that sort of thing.
absolutely.
It's just understanding and knowledge that's growing.
In fact, answering that kind of
exponentially in
question,
the-
that's what the God problem is all about. It's about how
godless,
does,
a godless.
how does a godless cosmos create?
Yeah, but
How
now
does-
you're making an assumption. If I made the godless process, the godless cosmos, there's been assumed by civilization, I guess, since 8, 7, 10,000 years ago in Neolithic, there's been this, or probably Cro-Magnon cave people sat around contemplating the mastodons are big. This is really amazing. They must be created by some god or some overarching entity that coheres everything. It's called God or various spirit understanding because they had a self-reflective consciousness.
Right.
Which is unique, I would think.
Oh, self-reflective consciousness. We haven't done adequate consciousness studies, that is, studies on whether consciousness exists. We don't know how to detect whether consciousness exists. This is a big problem.
Well, that is another order. of
Yeah,
things.
and when you get right down to epistemology, the philosophy of how we know what we know,
Or ontology.
yeah, that
Yeah.
you don't really know whether I'm conscious or not,
yeah.
and I don't really know whether you're
These
conscious
are
or not.
philosophical things.
Yeah.
One would wonder. Well, one wonders. Let's say, what was it? 70. Was it 75,000 years ago? 65,000. Yucatan, and the dinosaurs were done.
Right.
Right. There were dinosaurs.
65,000 years ago, the
65
meteor.
million years ago, that the Yucatan was struck and everything. One can assume we know what the creatures were like. We just did a program with that fellow, who Mr. Paul, Gregory Paul. He's an animation. He's an illustrator of the Mesozoic, I think,
Yeah.
of the dinosaurs. So
Right.
we have it, but one can assume that there was not at that level of evolution a consciousness such as was to emerge in the future that gave self-reflective questioning of the larger issues of the universe.
Well,
one would assume. Or crocodile.
Here's what we know.
Don't have that.
When you have a conversation with your dog,
My
your
dog's pretty smart.
Aha, yes,
Yeah.
I know. I've met your dog. We spent a lot of time together.
Yeah, right.
And your dog will cock his head and make facial expressions and make body movements that make you feel that this dog has as much of a consciousness as I do. The one thing we do know is this. Dogs do not have the kind of sophisticated language that we
That's
do.
right.
Chimpanzees do not have the kind of
That's right.
sophisticated language that we do.
No.
Even Irene Pepperberg's parrots,
No.
which show remarkable abilities to categorize things and do abstract thinking,
Yeah.
even they do
Yeah.
not have the kind of complex language that
Yeah.
we do. And when you add complex language to self-reflection,
There's a sense of consciousness behind that complex capability, and there's a movement in terms of an understanding of things in consciousness terms, in evolutionary terms.
and think of how
and
much
it's
of your
apexed
thinking.
by mankind, it would seem to me, fair
Right.
to say.
Well, yes, it is fair to say.
And we're only here 200,000
Yeah.
years on a scale of billions.
Stephen Jay Gould would have said, no, you can't say that. You're saying that simply because you're human and you're biased. But he's
Why
wrong.
would he say that? Why would he or Eldridge say that? Niles
It
Eldridge.
wouldn't have been Niles Eldridge. That was exclusively Stephen Jay Gould
Oh, really?
territory.
Okay.
Stephen Jay Gould said that because he is, what would we say? He was a Marxist-oriented, left-leaning liberal who felt that claiming any specialness for humanity was akin to claiming specialness for imperialist colonialists. And
Well, that'd be interesting to bring evolution into political terms in their
right,
everyday
and
reality.
you can.
Yeah.
You can bring it into
You
political
can. You
terms.
can. The things are related.
Yeah, right.
Uh-huh.
And as a consequence, he shunned the idea, and it was very popular to go along with him and say, oh no, there is no direction to evolution. But you can't possibly say that when you see how we go from space-time to things, how we go from things to the first atoms, how we go from the first atoms to these giant sweeping spirals called galaxies,
Yeah.
how we go from the galaxies to the point of gravity balls catching fire and igniting,
Yeah.
called suns, stars.
Yeah.
All of this is a progression in complexity. It's a progression in degrees of order. It's a progression in social terms. Social terms? How can you say social terms?
Well, you have to wait a little while because the social term is only going to come at the last nanosecond of the whole existence of everything as we understand it.
Social terms come at the very beginning.
Well, okay.
Social terms come at the very
that's
beginning.
interesting because I associate that with the Homo sapien species.
No,
Yeah,
social
yeah.
terms come at the
Okay.
very beginning because remember that giant unfurling sheet of space and time.
Yeah.
And remember how it somehow managed to clench itself together in terms space and time, raw space, time, and energy, space, time, and movement into things, those first quarks.
Yeah.
Those first quarks came complete with social rule books. Those first quarks.
Wait a minute. Social. Why do you call it social rules?
Well, let me describe it to
Okay,
you,
yeah,
and then
yeah,
you see if
spell it
that's a
out,
fair
spell it
way to
out.
describe it.
And didn't we just find the boson? The quantum mechanics people must be very
They
happy.
think they found the
Higgs
boson, but they're
Higgs-
still hedging, they're
Are
fudging
they
a
hedging
little
their
bit.
bets on?
Yes,
on-
they're hedging
on-
their bets on it, but it doesn't appear anywhere in this book.
On the
Higgs
accelerator.
boson doesn't really interest
No,
me
it would
that
have been
much.
too. It only just happened. if
Yeah,
it did,
right.
Yeah, over
But the
at
idea's been
CERN.
around since the 1960s of the
Okay,
Higgs
yeah,
boson.
looking for the Higgs boson.
Yeah,
Well,
but back to quarks,
quark,
okay?
yeah.
Quarks cannot exist on their own. They can only exist in groups of 2 or 3. So the task for quarks at that very instant when they come flurrying, when they come blizzarding out of space and time, their immediate need is to find partners. And if they don't find partners, well, they can't exist. They simply can't exist without
I got
partners.
a quote from this other book. I can't find it. But
Yeah,
there's a quote in there from
Right.
Dyson, from the young
Right.
Dyson. Yeah.
But there's more going on here than just needing to team up with others. there is something we call attraction and repulsion. A given quark, let's imagine you're a quark. If another quark that's exactly like you comes moseying along, you flee from it. That's repulsion. If a quark that's sufficiently dissimilar to you comes along, let's say it looks like Maggie, and then the two of you glom onto each other like that. Built into you is a rule book of who to flee and who to embrace. That's a social rule book. That's just as much a social rule book as Emily Post and an etiquette book.
Okay, that's interesting the way you see it that way. Yeah, you use that term social.
Right.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Well, again, those first quarks are either trios or quartet or duos. They're not individuals. There's individualism is a relatively new thing in this universe. Groupism is something that's been going on for a very long time. Remember those pressure waves that rang like a gong?
Yeah.
Those were massively social. Those involved trillions and trillions of participants, dancers, subatomic particles. And a galaxy is a massive social enterprise undertaken by more elementary particles than we have words for.
So the term social gets me, that's all, because
Right.
I'm hung up on language. Like
Right.
that, and I'm thinking that in terms of the modern, or to the experience that we're used to in calling social organization of people. you know.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
But it's a good use of the language.
in the days of Marx and Engels, Engels used to ask the question, how did humans go from strict isolation to families? Well, Harold, the answer is they didn't.
Oh, that's a very direct kind of way of going about it, sir.
Things go from social to individual, not from individual to social. The very first creatures on planet Earth, our foremothers, yours and mine, they were here 3.5 billion years ago. They're bacteria. Bacteria live in massive groups. These are groups so massive that a bacterial colony the size of your palm is so thin you can't see it. And yet it contains 7 trillion individuals. That's more individuals than all the humans who have ever lived. And they live as a complex society.
100 billion human beings have lived apparently, and we all walk in.
Here's the
we
deal.
walk in a sea of bacteria.
You walk in a sea of bacteria, but these bacterial colonies are very tightly integrated. They are knowledge processing machines. There are groups of 10,000 that go out to explore the landscape, and they send their messages out back.
And you got to think about the honeybees, too.
And the honeybees too, but
that's really interesting.
That's so much later that it's ridiculous.
Up
so,
the
but
line,
the point is
well,
that
it's later in time, so it's later in the evolutionary process that we're talking about.
So
for
at
now.
the very beginning, us social beings or us living beings were living in groups of 7 trillion.
Wait a minute,
That's big. That's not going from
You
isolation.
mean at the level of bacteria?
At the level of bacteria, but
Yes,
those again are our
650
foremothers.
million years ago, that's all there was. There were uniform unicellular spongiform.
Well, it was more like 1.2 billion years ago, because then we started developing multicellular, the first the eukaryotic cells and stuff like that. But one way or the other, the point is
that process of going from mineral to the earliest thing, that was probably about what, 3.5
that would have been
billion?
3.82 billion years ago.
I think,
Right.
That we crossed the line from where the inorganic began to have the constituents of what was to be ribonucleic acid.
Okay.
That
Now,
thing's so
and here's a big question for you. When we go from that transition to dead atoms and dead molecules to ribonucleic acids, and
I think you have to go to the constituents of it, and this is over eons of time. That's the thing we have to
But
take
nonetheless,
in mind.
when we take that course, have we demonstrated entropy, things falling apart, or have we demonstrated things falling together?
Well, that's what Mr. Fuller would say, that is an anti-entropic function.
Yes, but it's you can't always say that. You can't always put things in negatives. You know, if you coin everything in negatives, you're conning yourself.
Well, okay, maybe, but at the same time, now it's also very disquieting, because one of the things is things happen in time and everything like that, and also we live in There's a term that was coined. My fellow I really like as you know, is Bucky Fuller. A lot of other people do. He coined the term, or he brought into use the term synergy,
Right.
which is the behavior systems unpredicted by the sum of the parts. You could call
Right.
it emerging properties.
Right,
It's
right.
something that comes unexpectedly.
Right.
It is happening.
And that happens
Which
all
means,
over the place.
I know, but what it indicates is there are no absolutes in a
Right.
certain sense. Now, there's no absolutes, so the idea of there being a God
Right.
that would give an absolutist
Right.
quality to something or anything like that, there are none of this through time because things are emerging that we did not know. We had Einstein. Before Einstein, there was, he developed a basic understanding of physics, and then we get to quantum mechanics, and they have a certain thing, the 4 laws of gravity and all that, weak laws, and they get to think. And then along comes Brian Greene.
Right.
And there would be, in a sense, people would say, that's forever. We
Right.
now have the physics of the universe, we
Right.
understand. And then along comes Brian, and that would be a closed system.
Right.
That would be entropy would be operative
Right.
within that. And so we got to study. And then along comes Brian Greene and string theory, and they say, well, this may not be the end of the universe 13.7 billion years ago because we may have 10 dimensions.
Right.
And we may have wormholes that
Right.
connect parallel universes
Right.
like soap bubbles.
Right.
So it may be a closed system. It may be an open
Right.
system. It's up for grabs.
Well-
It's synergetic, and there's emerging properties in time that emerge, if
Okay,
you can
let's-
understand.
let's-
So there's no absolute.
Right. But let's pull a few of these things apart. Synergy is an extremely important concept.
It means the behavior of systems unpredicted by the sum of the parts.
Okay, now let's go back
And
to...
he would use that term to 1,000 people to
Right.
give an audience of scientifically understanding.
Right.
Does anybody understand? That was in the 50s. Anybody know the word synergy? Nobody would know it.
Right.
Now it's on the every ad agency's lips because it's really good for selling
Right,
things.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, the deal is that you see synergies taking place from the very beginning of the universe, and they're one of the major reasons that the second law of thermodynamics is bullshit.
Okay.
And
Wait,
here's
wait
how...
a minute. This
yeah.
is network television. I guess it's okay. Go ahead. Yeah, yeah.
Horse pucky. Let's call it horse pucky.
That's better.
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
And it's all
Okay.
more.
Yes,
okay, yeah.
right. A little more wholesome.
No, it's more. It's more Al-Quran.
Yeah, right.
yeah.
Okay, so here's what happens. Remember those quarks that came together in
Yeah.
groups of 3?
Yeah.
Well, now, if we used Aristotelian logic,
Mm.
Aristotle said that if you take things and reduce them to their elements,
Yeah.
and you find the laws of those elements,
Yeah, you're right.
you will understand everything you need to know about the system.
There's going to be emerging properties in time.
That's what Aristotle fails to take.
That's what I'm
into
saying. That's kind
account
of a
utterly.
biggie. That's
Right.
a biggie,
And
yeah.
that's where, and
Yeah.
in the emergent properties,
Yeah.
is where the creativity of the cosmos
Right,
that this book is
right,
after
right.
occurs.
Uh-huh.
But let's go back to those 3 quarks getting
Yeah.
together.
Oh.
You would think, okay, I'm going to take 3 quarks, I'm going to put them together. What would I get?
Yeah.
3 quarks, of
Uh-huh.
course. 1 plus 1 equals 2. 1 plus 1 plus 1
Yeah.
equals 3. 3
Yeah.
quarks.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not what happens. All of a sudden, when you get 3 quarks together, this whole new property emerges and comes from nowhere. And it's radical. It's really different. It's the properties, in one case, with one kind of trio, it's the properties of what we call a proton. And in another case, it's the properties of what we call a neutron. And those properties have nothing to do with just knowing the elementary laws of the quarks themselves.
Okay, let's go. One of the problems is in this universe and everywhere else is time, right? We only have so much time,
Right.
and let's get to evolution. Let's say we have evolution, and we get to some of the more current things. We have evolution. What is it? About 3.8 billion years ago, the organic evolutionary process got started. There's been 99% of the species that have ever existed has gone extinct. We get to the point where there's an evolutionary pattern that includes a wide and huge variety of emerging properties and great variety of vegetative and animal expression that makes up the biosphere of this whole planet.
Right.
One of which is a hominoid line,
Right.
which seems to be our ancestors.
Right.
We had Australopithecine 4 to
Right.
7 million years ago. We can understand Lucy and so forth. And then it seems to me, as I understand, that from that there came about 1.5 million years ago Homo habilis, which
Right.
is the direct ancestor. We were, as a species, contained within Homo habilis. We
Right.
did not exist. We were an emerging property
Right.
in terms of that. And then 200,000 years ago, I think is the best guess, our species appeared.
Right.
Okay, and we get to that point, and we've been here for 200,000 years. There's about 100 billion people have existed as best the estimates over the whole of the course of the human experience. And where do we stand in evolutionary terms as a species now, as we get to such a point of such exponential increasing capability for understanding in scientific, rational, intellectual terms the realities of the universe and of the larger biosphere and so forth of this planet? Are we at a point of qualitative transformation at this point in time? Or where do we stand when we get to the point where we have weapons systems that are extensions of our technological capability, that are species lethal apparently from the modeling?
Right.
Existentially new only since 1970 or so?
Right.
And where do we stand in terms of the materialistic organization of world society, in terms of the haves and have-nots within human society that threatens, if it's not dealt with, to unleash the weapons that can stop conscious evolution? Are we at a time of qualitative transformation close on to what Stephen Jay Gould or Eldridge would say is punctuated equilibrium? Are we coming to the end of the human experience?
No,
in
I don't
evolutionary
think. I
terms?
don't think we're
Okay,
coming
will we
there
ever?
at all.
Will we ever?
Yes,
It's
there.
called
Yes, we will.
It would be called a synergistic emerging property,
Right.
such as you indicated before, and the physics could never happen.
Well, we're showing
Yeah.
this incredible ability to be stubbornly human, to be
Well,
stubbornly.
we've had 200,000 years.
Right, well, we have human nature. Look, we've been going through qualitative transformations every 5 to 10 years.
Oh, what do
I
don't
mean by
understand.
that?
What do you? No, quality. I'm talking not
Yes.
quantitative.
No, qualitative. We've
Well,
been going through qualitative transformations.
Explain.
Okay. Let's start at 1800. In 1800, people were not much better off than they had been in the days of the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire had these post roads where you could take a horse, ride it for 40 miles, pick up another horse, a fresh horse, ride it for another 40 miles, and go 1,200 miles in 3 days. Astonishing.
Did that add up to that?
I
don't think that
I have to
adds
go
up.
back.
I don't
no,
think
I have
that
to
works.
go
I
back
think you
and
gotta
I have to
calculate.
go back and do the arithmetic
Yeah.
again. But Constantine got a message. Constantine grew up in England,
300 BC.
and he got a message that his father
Yeah.
was seriously ill in Asia Minor,
Yeah.
way over in the neighborhood of Turkey someplace.
right.
And he managed to do that trip in about something like 3 days, a very
Okay.
short amount of time, again, by taking a fresh horse every 40 miles or so
Yeah.
at a post house that was set up specifically for that purpose.
What?
And
why
my
do
arithmetic
you
could
call
be
that
wrong.
A qualitative term?
No, we haven't
mean,
gotten to the transformations
all
yet.
right.
In 1800, Europe was actually not as well off as the Roman Empire
Right.
had been.
Uh-huh.
Then in Europe we had the invention of the steam engine,
Yeah.
right? And there was first the invention of the steam engine. The first steam engines before 1800 actually were the size of a building,
Yeah,
the
I
size
know.
of this building. They were very big.
They went down to Cornwall for the copper mine.
Yeah,
That was the first
right,
use of it.
exactly,
And then
to
locomotives,
pull the
and it
water
was
out.
a precursor
But
to
this
the
is long before the
Industrial
locomotives.
Revolution.
And then you
Invented
had
the same year as the Wealth of Nations by Adam
Right,
Smith,
exactly.
and the Revolution in the colonies.
right,
of
and
the
then you
Britain
had
America.
Watt and Bolton, who brought the size of the steam engine from a building down to something that
Yeah,
was
but
portable.
what I want to get at is
Yeah.
why do you see these as qualitative transformations instead of that being part of a quantitative change within a
Well, let me
context?
give you just a very stark
I
example.
mean, a qualitative
Yeah.
transformation would be the emergence of the Homo sapiens species as opposed to Homo habilis. That's
well,
qualitative.
you can tell me
That's
whether
across the
I'm
ground.
going to give you a candidate for qualitative change, and you tell me whether you think it's for real
Well,
or
I
not.
gave you one saying there may be
Yeah.
a new species emerging out of the cocoon
I don't
of
think so.
human existence.
No, I don't think so at all.
Well, that would be qualitative.
That would be qualitative.
That would be big
Well,
time.
let me give you an example,
Okay.
and then you judge it.
Okay.
In 1988, I had done a 20-year field expedition into popular culture, which I knew nothing about.
I know,
and
into
I'd-
music.
Yeah, and
you
I
went
founded
with all the biggies.
Yeah, and I founded the biggest PR firm in the music industry with Michael Jackson, Prince, Bob Marley, Bette Midler, First Science Nerd.
Bob Marley?
Yes.
I love Bob Marley.
Yeah.
And yet,
Well,
did you
it
ever
was
meet
lots
Yellow
more.
Man? Yellow Man?
No.
Yellow
no.
Man was great.
Yeah, nope, never
reggae.
met him.
Okay.
At any rate, I was working with all of these people, and all of a sudden I got very sick.
Yeah.
And I got so sick that I couldn't talk for 5 years, so sick that I couldn't leave my bedroom. I could get as far as the bathroom. That was it.
Did
Period.
they ever get down
Yeah,
on
it's chronic
why
fatigue syndrome.
I know, but
Yeah.
why?
We
Why
don't-
does that happen?
Well, we could go into that, but let me give you the qualitative example of a qualitative
Never hell of a
change.
movie.
Yeah. But, so there I am, too weak to speak, and I can't even have another person in the room with me. And it took
Wow.
me a long time to realize that I had to stop trying to sit up. Whenever I tried to sit up, horrible things would happen to me.
What do you mean
And-
horrible?
Well, things like losing my ability to speak. My
Amazing.
insistence on trying to sit up was doing me in, and it took me 3 years to realize that.
Wow.
So finally,
amazing.
so
Yeah.
finally, I just lay there in the bed without trying to sit up,
Yeah.
and I had 2 computers set up next to my bed.
Right.
And I found a Chinese machine that would allow me to control 2 computers using just 1 monitor and 1 keyboard. And I had a keyboard on my lap that was propped up like this.
Yeah.
And I transitioned from being a real human, since I couldn't deal with other people. I couldn't have them in the same room. I couldn't talk. I transitioned to being a cyber human.
Okay.
It was 1988. The World Wide Web would not be invented. The internet would not become as a thing, a mass thing, until roughly 1995.
Right.
Google would not come around until
Yeah.
2003. This
Right.
is long before all of the tools that we associate with the internet.
Yeah, and all going exponential.
Right. I
now.
became a cyber human, and I went out online all the time with a friend from Texas. We knew each other through the internet. That's the only way we knew each other. We didn't even know each other through the
You were
telephone
still
because I
in the,
couldn't
you were
talk.
still in the syndrome.
Yeah, I was in bed. I was stuck.
Yeah.
And we went and we hunted down various treatments for CFS for the illness
Was he
we
in the
both
same
had.
or she in the same condition?
No, she was better off than I was
Okay,
at the
right.
time.
You were a real
Yeah,
case.
basket case.
basket case.
And we managed to hunt down the things that eventually would make me better. Now think about this for a moment.
well, that's a
if this-
qualitative change
Yes,
for you
if,
individually.
but if
yeah.
this had happened to me 10 years earlier,
Yeah. You
I
couldn't
would
have done anything.
No, I
Yeah.
couldn't have done any
You'd
of it.
still
And
be-
a
you'd still
whole
be-
world,
yeah.
a whole landscape
Yeah.
that was available to
Right,
me
yeah.
would not have
And
been
you
there.
flowered so since.
Yeah.
Because you're writing really cutting edge stuff. Yeah.
So is
Yeah.
that a qualitative change
That's a
in the
qualitative
possibilities
change
of
in
being
you,
human?
in your expression for an individual.
in me, it was to me it was
But
happening more
evolution-
dramatically
yeah,
than for most of us.
yeah, right.
But it was happening to all of us. We were all gaining access to this whole sphere, this entire planet that hadn't existed before, the cyber planet,
Okay.
where we could relate to each other in ways
Well,
we could never have related before.
Goes back to Turing.
Yeah, I mean, it's
yeah.
so different from. I became part, for example, of a philosophy of history group
Mm.
that was run by a guy in Siberia.
Uh-huh.
Now, in the old days, when people like Erasmus
Yeah.
were setting up groups, they were based on that post system, the system of having post horses at periodic
yeah.
intervals.
Right.
And it took days or weeks
No.
to get a message from one person to another.
Yeah.
Well, now I could do messages back and forth to Siberia
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
I wrote
yeah,
an
yeah.
email, I sent it, 15 minutes later I could get back an answer.
Yeah.
We could have wild, frantic arguments about Edward Said. I was thrown out of the group. They all said, "Oh, good old Edward," and I thought Edward Said's a monster. And
Edward Said.
yes,
Oh,
yes.
oh,
And
yeah,
when I
yeah,
said
yeah.
that, they threw me out of the group. But all
At
this could
Columbia, he was at Columbia.
Yeah, he was
Yeah,
at
yeah.
Columbia, but
Yeah.
these people were in Siberia.
Yeah, right, okay.
But the point is, in the days before the internet, a 24-hour period in which Edward Said's name is brought up, it becomes wildly bandied about by people in South Africa, Australia, Japan, and Europe, not to mention Siberia. And then an American member of the group says, "But I don't like Edward Said," and is immediately thrown out of the group. All of that happening in 24 hours. Sorry, that could not happen only 10 years
Well,
earlier.
so you're making a good case for the information technology revolution.
Yeah, and
In
it has
terms of
changed. It
qualitative-
has changed.
Well, it's coming to it's like that. It seems to me, if I may, Howard,
Yeah.
every day
Right.
now comes, and it's coming exponential.
Right.
It's coming every day. Come dozens of new breakthroughs in every
Right.
field, everywhere. It's like a quickening in a
Right.
pregnancy. Women would know.
Right.
It's a quickening. It's coming to
Right.
a final Asian, and that would be leading to a qualitative transformation. A major qualitative transformation on a systems term in universe is, if we get down, as I posited, it would be a whole systems thing, an opening upon something that is, closing quotes, on 200,000 years of our existence as a species
Right.
within a larger context.
Right.
That would be a qualitative
Well,
major change
you know the
which has not yet occurred.
Well, you know the transhumanists say that we're about to become transhuman.
Okay, I don't know that well. Transhuman would be
something that
qualitative.
We're going to take one of those.
We cannot use the term we're speciating. We're going through it. We're going through this the process that is so slow in evolutionary terms. Wide awake now.
Right.
Joyce talked of that.
Right.
And McLuhan.
Right.
We're going through the thing wide awake. We're now aware of the fact that we are going into another level of consciousness in universe that is transcendent to what we've been for 200,000 years as a collective species called Homo sapien. Call it Homo. We're coming into a new relationship to the cosmos. And if not, could we axiomatically accept that that will at some point happen? If it isn't now, there is a case to be made, including the internet and all that technology, information technology, but it's also biology. It's also all these other fields, and we're at a time either where we can stop evolutionary process in this universe, the leading edge of it, or we can liberate the entire Homo sapiens species in a way that we have a capability of doing, which is equally significant on the living side.
I think one of the things that's going to carry us...
moment of qualitative transformation.
Well, as you can see, I believe that things like the internet
you believe...
Oh, I'm a positivist.
You're optimistic for the human process.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
You don't think there's any chance we're going to blow it up?
Oh, I think there's a good chance we could blow ourselves up, but I don't want to see it. I certainly don't want to see it.
Oh, that's unique.
Right.
We have transcended. It's very real. For economics, informs all of politics and everything. We very well may have collectively transcended material scarcity. As an ontologic reality for the Homo sapiens species within a largely conceived ecological context. Or we have on the other side the ability, we do have the ability which you've never had, to be able to stop conscious evolution by wiping out the Homo sapiens species with the weapon. That's that's only applied in both cases till about the year 1970. Making a case for this being not just a quantitative, a long history, the Enlightenment and Rome, and that it's a time of qualitative transformation in evolutionary terms.
Well, I think one of the big steps in changing us all is going to be coming to take for granted that habitations in space, you can make a habitation in space that's 4 miles in diameter and 20 miles long. It's called an O'Neill cylinder. And you can put it, and you can put it in a position where it rotates so that it creates its own gravity. It has unending energy because it can scoop up the energy of the sun. And it gives 5 million square miles of territory for farms, territory for parks, territory for backyards, front yards, and gardens on the side of your house.
That would be like physically going into space. What about the thing is synergy, the behavior of systems, and it seems there's nothing but resonancy, even at a molecular level, between non-isolated, there's a resonancy that interaccommodates systems and so forth. Why would it not be that in our relationship to the broader cosmos that we have to move physically into the wider universes that may exist or something? But what it would be a resonancy of a imagine a world where every human being is able to realize their absolute full potential. Rather than be so truncated in what they're able to realize, as has been the case throughout the whole experiment. Zero sum. If you win, I have to lose. I'll conquer you, you conquer me, we'll fight, all this kind of stuff. But if everybody was doing it, realizing their full potential, there's 100 trillion cells in the human organism. About 90% of them are bacteria in the gut. And every cell matters. Every cell operates in a synergistic resonancy. Or you did popular music. When people get into a music thing and everybody's hitting full tilt boogie in terms of their instruments, there's a resonatingly something more than the sum. If you have a liberated humanity, there would be a resonancy that would accommodate us to universe at a level that is not available to us as we're still in the womb but it would be a resonance that accommodates us to the outer environment rather than physically moving out with a lot of clunky materials that we don't need.
Well,
Do you understand what I'm
absolutely, we need to move out there, and we need to
saying? No,
move.
that
but
would
we
be
do-
a consciousness.
I know, but
that
we,
would inter-accommodate
it's
us.
not enough to do that. It's
I mean,
not
they're
enough.
still they're still O'Neill's. They're still looking for SETI. They're still looking for intelligent
Right.
radio waves. Or
Well,
something.
look, there's a whole universe up there. Look, what has life shown as its most fundamental tendency over the course of the last 3.5 billion years? It is imperialistic, it is colonialistic, it is ambitious, it is greedy, it wants to grab...
for all of life, not just
yeah,
human.
all of
Yeah,
life.
Yeah, okay.
And it
yeah.
wants to take as many inanimate molecules and atoms as it possibly can grab hold of and impress them, seduce them, recruit them into the process of life, make them part of the grand enterprise of biomass. And right now, life, to the best of our knowledge, life has only had that opportunity with one tiny little pill of a planet. But there is a species on that planet. There are many species with many different capabilities.
Yeah.
But there's only one species on that planet that is capable of taking life beyond to the 8.5 minute point above our heads, just an 8.5 minute trip above our
Yeah, I
heads,
know, yeah.
beyond the gravity well, and taking life out there to build O'Neill cylinders, to terraform the Mars and the Moon, to take life to green the galaxy, to garden the
Well,
cosmos.
that's our vision, yeah.
And the species that can do that is us.
You think we're going to be able to do that? And there's no point in looking at it as a collective thing where you've got to get everybody, in a certain sense, liberated through the capability that is newly available to us of transcending. There's enough.
Right.
There's never been enough. There's enough.
Humans
to
are
build...
fortunately built with a sense that there is never enough.
No.
Yeah, but
that's that
Yeah.
can be asserted.
Right.
Economics, which informs all politics and everything, we've got the
Right.
debt crisis and all
Right.
that stuff is in the news, is defined as the science of the allocation of scarce resources. What about the allocation of abundant resources? What if there is enough for
yeah.
all and the ecology, and it's a new capability that we can build this system so that like a finely tuned individual that's in good shape is able to relate to the broader cosmos. We're out of time, I guess, and everything. We're out of time. That's the trouble. We don't have enough time. But I have a feeling we're coming to that kind of a thing. I don't know about the moving out into space, maybe.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think it would be a matter of the liberation of the entire Homo sapiens species and get a resonancy like a philharmonic orchestra.
Right. It
But
would be
that's
nice.
just a thought.
Yes.
We live in an amazing time.
Right.
Your pleasure to have had the perception of Howard Bloom, major intellectual. And let's show once more the book. It's called, that's an assumption that is absolute, the God Problem, How a Godless Cosmos Creates. I think the idea of God or something ought to be up on the table in order to deal with a lot of the spiritual traditions. So it's a little too absolutist for me, how a godless, to say God. There may be, because synergy is the behavior system unpredictable, and that synergy may reveal God.
We are God in the process of becoming. No question about it.
Anyway, your pleasure. Good to see you again,
Thank you,
Howard.
Harold.
The beginning, we got to do more talk like this, and thank you for viewing. That's it. Tune in again. We'll be coming back again tomorrow. That's it from our new studios at the schoolhouse, at the firehouse here on 104th Street in Manhattan. Thank you for viewing. We'll be coming back tomorrow. Thank you for viewing.